In this video, we will show you how to replace your driver's side rear upper control arm on this Jeep Liberty. This is part of your rear suspension located behind your rear wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. A quick note before we get into this is we're going to have to remove the drive shaft. When we're removing the drive shaft, you have to have the rear wheels up and off the ground and the vehicle in neutral. So make sure you chalk your front wheels, assuming those are staying on the ground. Once the rear of the vehicle is safely raised and supported, we're going to remove the driver's side rear wheel. To do this, we're going to remove all 5 of our 19mm lug nuts. With the wheel out of the way, we have a clear view of our rear lower control arm. If you were to look at the forward aspect of this, you're going to find that you have a mounting bolt that comes through from the inside towards the outside, and here's the mounting nut. Now, since the bolt comes from the inside there, we're going to have to maneuver the fuel tank out of the way to be able to remove that bolt when the time comes. And it's because of this reason that we're going to remove the drive shaft. Now let's move up from there. We're going to have to remove the fuel cap. Turn that counterclockwise. A quick inspection of the seal, of course. Hang that off to the side. The next thing we'll have to do is start dislodging the fuel filler neck from the body of the vehicle. Looking in this area, you're going to find that you have a rubber seal. To remove the seal, you could use a small angled pick if necessary. We'll just be careful not to damage that seal as we pull it out of place. Just go ahead and make sure that's still soft and pliable. This one's still in good enough condition. We'll set it aside. With the seal out of the way, let's go ahead and make sure we cover the port leading into the filler neck. Now we can start making our way under the vehicle. As we're making our way under the vehicle, we're looking at the fuel filler neck, which will lead to the fuel tank. We're going to dislodge this bracket right here, which is held in place with a 13mm headed mounting bolt. Now this is where you're going to have your vehicle in neutral because we have to mark the drive shaft and then remove the mounting hardware. We're going to make sure we mark the drive shaft along the front and the rear of the drive shaft so we know exactly where the drive shaft will fit into position during the reinstallation process. Go right along that yoke as well. We have a clear marking. Now we can start removing that hardware. Let's use a 14mm along the backside here to remove the mounting hardware. For the first bolt, we'll go ahead and remove it, a quick inspection, and start it back in a couple threads. Pause back here and do the exact same thing up along the front of the drive shaft. When you go to loosen this, you're going to find that the drive shaft will want to spin on you. If that's the case, go ahead and use a pry bar, make your way in between the drive shaft and the yoke. We'll be careful not to damage the U-joint in any way. While holding pressure, you can continue on to turning this counterclockwise. There's one. Same process for the rest. Now with that bolt out, we still have one bolt left in here. We'll go ahead and use a rubber mallet. We're going to tap on this area of the drive shaft, not the aluminum portion here. We want to break it free. After we've done that, we're going to remove our bolt and safely raise this drive shaft up. After that, we'll make our way to the front of the drive shaft. Now up at the front of the drive shaft, we're going to repeat the process, fully remove the first bolt, and start it back in just a couple threads. Keep in mind, as we're spinning this drive shaft, you don't want it to fall down off that rear support. With all the hardware out of here, in exception of the one bolt that we left in just a couple threads, we're going to tap this to break it free. After that, remove this bolt and we'll fully remove the drive shaft. Make sure you're holding onto the drive shaft so it cannot fall. If this falls, it could get off balance or potentially hurt you in some way. Let's hold on to that drive shaft. Now that we have the drive shaft out of the vehicle, pause under here, make your way up into the passenger compartment, put your vehicle back in park, and you can remove your key. With the drive shaft out of the way, we're going to make our way up along the passenger side of the fuel tank, along the center of the vehicle. We're looking at the shield, and on the shield, as you make your way up to the body of the vehicle, you're going to find a wiring harness that leads into the body of the vehicle. For this, you just want to go ahead and separate this area so you have plenty of slack. Once you've completed that, we're going to continue on by applying support underneath the fuel tank, keeping in mind that we will have to lower the fuel tank to be able to gain access to our mounting bolts. Now, once you've applied support underneath the fuel tank, you're going to find that you have 5 15mm headed bolts to remove from the shield, holding it to the body. There's 2 bolts on the inboard side and there's 3 bolts on the outboard side of the fuel tank. Let's go with the inboard front bolt first. Time for that rearward bolt. Now let's move to the driver's side rear. Put our 15mm bolt up there. While we're in this area, we're also going to remove these 2 mounting nuts and remove this bracket from the shield. A quick inspection of the bracket, set it aside. Moving from there, we'll continue forward. We have our center mounting bolt along the driver's side. Let's continue down to the front bolt here. This is the last one. Now we can start lowering the fuel tank. When lowering the fuel tank, you want to be extremely careful because we still have a lot of things attached to it. We only need to come down far enough that we'll be able to gain access to those mounting bolts. Just going to do a quick pause and an inspection. This is not a race. Of course, we do need to be as safe as possible. Next, let's continue on to our ABS wire, which leads across the lower control arm. We have to dislodge it. To do that, you can use a small pick or small screwdriver. On the inboard side, there's an area that you can release each one of these clips. Separate your ABS wire, make sure there is no damage. Now we can start removing the hardware, holding the lower control arm in place. We'll start at the rear differential area. Now on this area, you're going to find a 21mm nut, and the bolt head is on the outboard side. For that, we'll be using an 18mm. There's our mounting bolt. A quick inspection, you will be reusing this. The next thing we'll do is follow that control arm to where it connects onto the frame. We'll start loosening this 21mm mounting nut. When we do so, you want to make sure that this arm does not fall down and potentially hurt you, so we'll just hold on to that. And swing this down. There's that. Let's give this a wiggle. You can start removing that bolt towards the fuel tank here. What you're going to find is you have to push the forward end of the fuel tank towards the center of the vehicle. Once you've done that, we'll continue on with removing that mounting bolt. A quick inspection of that, and now we can remove the arm. There it is, friend. With the control arm out of place, clean and inspect the mounting points. Now we can prepare to install our brand new rear lower control arm. Before installing this, you need to pay attention along each side. In the center of the bushing, we want to make sure that we measure this metallic area where the bolt goes through. You'll find that one side is actually thinner than the other side, and we want to make sure the wider side is on the frame side. As you can tell, when we bring this up in here, we only have a minimal amount of room in between the frame and the arm itself. If you were to have it backwards, there's quite a bit more. And of course, if you needed to, you can go ahead and measure it to confirm which side is the wider side. Let's get this in place. We have our forward mounting bolt. As we start bringing it through, we're going to make sure we pay attention to this locking area here. You want to make sure that this tab fits into this area of the frame. The port for it is actually along the front, just in front of the bolt. Just pivot this around, slide it in. Once that's bottomed out, continue on by starting on the mounting nut, but do not tighten this yet. Now we can pivot this up towards the rear differential tube. We have our mounting bolt. That bolt comes through from the outside towards the inside, and we'll use our 21mm nut on the inboard side there. Now, before tightening our hardware, we need to go ahead and lower this down closer to the ground. So what we're going to do is reinstall a fuel tank. Let's start getting this fuel tank into the proper positioning here. We want to make sure that we do not get caught on anything, such as possibly that emergency brake cable or even the wiring harness on the inboard side of the fuel tank. Cable there. Wiring is safe. Let's get our forward mounting bolt in here. We're only starting in the mounting hardware. We are not tightening any of this until each piece of mounting hardware is started in. Put this back one in here. Now we can make our way to the outer mounting bolts. This one in here. As we make our way to the rear mounting bolt here, we have to make sure we install the bracket. Reinstall the mounting nuts holding the bracket to the fuel tank as well. Once everything's started in, we'll go ahead and snug it up, and then the torque for each piece of mounting hardware is 45 foot-pounds. Now we can move to the inboard side. Now that everything's snugged up, we can go ahead and torque these to 45 foot-pounds, as I mentioned. With both of those tightened up, we can torque those to 45 as well. Let's resecure our wiring harness on the inboard side. Just press that right in. Double check to make sure it's secured. With the mounting hardware in and torqued, let's remove the support from under the fuel tank. Next, you're going to have your vehicle in neutral again. Once you've done that, we'll make our way back underneath the vehicle, and it's time to install the drive shaft. Get this up in here. Now what we're going to do is make sure we align our mounting points. We had marked the drive shaft so we know exactly where it goes. It needs to go back in the same position. It's also a good idea to make sure you use some blue thread locker on this application. Once you start in the hardware, it's time to snug it. When you snug it, you want to go crisscross. Now that they're snug, I'm going to torque these to 80 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. Now that we've torqued the front, let's do the exact same thing along the rear of the drive shaft. Now we can make our way towards the back side here. We're going to do this same process, aligning our mounting points here. We have our marking, that's aligned as well. We have our 4 mounting bolts along the back side. Each of these does have that blue thread locker, as I mentioned for the front. We're going to repeat that same thing on the back side here. Once you've started them in, we're going to snug these up and I'll torque these to 80 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner as well. Before we start tightening the mounting bolts that hold the control arm in, we need to make sure we have the differential tube in the original ride height position. Right now, everything's sitting down. We need to go ahead and apply upward pressure on this. While that's being supported, we can start tightening the mounting hardware. We'll start at the rear differential portion here. For this, we're going to snug it and then we'll torque it to 150 foot-pounds. Got our 18mm for the bolt head. Now moving to the front, I'm going to safely use a pry bar in between the bolt head and the gas tank, holding it in place. Use our 21mm to snug this up and then torque it to 120 foot-pounds. Let's make our way to the ABS wire. You do want to make sure that this is secured in some way. You can either use a wire tie and hold it down to the control arm, or you can come up to your brake flex hose. I'll be coming up to the flex hose. I have a small adapter here. Now that your rear control arm's torqued, we can go ahead and remove the support from underneath the rear differential tube. One last quick inspection in this area, and we can reinstall our wheel. Once you have all the lug nuts started on, you want to go ahead and bottom them out. we'll get the wheel safely back on the ground and torque each of these to 100 foot-pounds. With the wheel safely on the ground, we'll be torquing these in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Now let's make our way up to the fuel door area. Just remove our protective plug from along the top of that filler neck. Don't need that in there. The next thing you need to have is your rubber seal. You remember when we had removed it, it has the groove that will fit along the body of the vehicle. Start from one end, start working its way all the way around here. We're trying to make sure the filler neck goes up into that center port. Now when installing this, you should be able to move that filler neck around as necessary. Just keep that cap out of the way. There we are. Just want to make sure we're completely seated all the way around. I can see it starting to come out over on this side. There we are. Now we'll just align the filler neck with the port here, and we can make our way safely back underneath so we can install that 13mm headed bolt that holds the filler neck in place. We have our 13mm headed mounting bolt that's going to be holding this bracket that holds the filler neck in place. Double check to make sure that's completely secured. Let's reinstall our fuel cap here. Like that. Tighten it so you hear a click. Make sure it's secure. Close your fuel cap. Okay, friend, we finished our installation. The next thing you need to do is go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test. Listen for funny noises. Get yourself safely down to your local alignment shop. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.